This video will be about using plumber's epoxy to attach the mounting point for filter housing. So I constructed what's going to hold my filter so that there's a jar lip attached to the box that the filter and the fan are in, and that can screw right onto this lid. I marked the points on the lid that I want to be face up, and I'm going to mount this to the bike helmet right here. And first thing I'm going to do is score this a little bit so the epoxy has a place to attach to. So in addition to keeping points in the game, another meaning of the word score is to scratch. And I'd be curious about the etymology. That's the origin of the word. If scoring came from the practice of using scratches in something to keep score. Also, finally, may have found a way to glue directly to the type of bag that I'm working with. The trick for that was to look up the material, polyethylene. And there are some glues specifically made. Ordered that, hasn't come yet. So far though, I'm happy with just having used the stitching, though it would be nice to straighten up the outside of the bag, and I might be able to use the glue to do that. I'll see. Now I'm going to kind of mark, it's hard to see there, but I did mark the areas where I want this to go, but I'm just going to kind of double check. And then score those as well. Try not to actually cut the bag or myself while doing that. So good. The reason I'm using the plumber's epoxy for this is that it works a lot like fired clay. not quite as strong as fired clay. Definitely stronger than just regular dried clay. But it's good if you want to have something that's going to have a shape to it and hold that shape. In the case of this attachment, what I would like is, while there's some structure in the helmet to allow ventilation and the air to go by, I want to place this so that it's a little bit above the helmet so that there's even more room for air to move by. It would kind of be nice if I could, in retrospect, I think it would have been better to have mounted this to the helmet before I actually attached the bag. The one thing I can do here is just have some tape holding in these bolts. What I should be able to do is just carefully, I don't rip the bag at all, just remove some of the tape. And then unroll the bag. I want to pull everything off from the side here. And then that'll give me more space to work under the hood. I can just now I have much easier access to the back of this helmet. And I can just re-roll and take the bag again later. I forgot where to put my trash bin. Alright. And I want to make sure that my surface is clean before I apply the glue. I did work with this epoxy before and realized that it's nice to have two sets of gloves when working with it. Since you shape this directly with your hands, it's important to have some pair of gloves to protect your skin. And it's good to have a second pair of gloves if you need to work with it or move apart and you don't want to have that covered with the epoxy from before. Now for me, a tricky part when working with epoxies is figuring out how much to use. So there we go, that's the epoxy. And whatever amount you mix is going to dry within the time period that you have. Forget, how long do I have with this? "15, 25 minutes. So I'll give myself 10 minutes. So I want 1, 2, so I'm going to go back and look at the helmet. I'm thinking that I want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces, probably roughly centimeter round. And eventually I'll have to fix this camera in one position. Wonder if I can get both the helmet and the glue in the frame. probably be blocking much of this frame from time to time. But once I start working with the epoxy, I won't really be able to adjust my camera. So let's see, figure that would make at least 2, 3. So I'm gonna end up taking half of it. It's often better to have a little bit more than a little bit less, especially since once I'm attaching these to the helmet, I won't really be able to put in a new piece without kind of unseating the others. So I want to do all of this within the 10 minutes that I have. Echo, cancel all timers.
Canceling all your timers.
I'm going to put the part that I'm not using away and start a timer for 10 minutes. So I have some idea of how much time I have to work. After I start combining the epoxy and the hardener, I'm not sure if the hardener is on the outside or the inside. Echo, set a 10-minute timer.
10 minutes, starting now.
So now I'm kneading this. Kneading is a word that's often used with putty or clay, and you initially shape it and try to mix it together, and especially with clay, trying to get air bubbles out. Here I'm just trying to maximize the mixing of the different materials. I'm not as concerned about getting air on the inside, so I'm using a different technique. I could do something like this if I was just trying to get air, but my focus is not so much getting the air out as it is just mixing everything together. And this is why it's good to have 2 pairs of gloves. I need something cleaned up. These hands won't work, they're covered with epoxy. So now, plan was to have about 5 equal parts. So that's 1, 2, and when the epoxy mixes with the hardener, or the resin mixes with the hardener, get a chemical reaction, and you can feel it heat up. Alright, that's roughly equal. Trying to reach for a napkin and getting pieces of polyethylene plastic instead. Oh, this probably wasn't a good idea because this is going to kind of stick to my hands directly. Not to my hands, but to the gloves. The layer of epoxy that these gloves had on them was kind of sticking to the balls that I was trying to shape a bit much. I'm going to try a clean set of gloves. which I had ready for just this occasion, and one of these pieces of plastic that I accidentally grabbed while reaching for the napkin. And I'll try to shape it through the polyethylene. Well, that's not actually working as well. That's not working that much better than the gloves. So much for that idea. But the gloves that I didn't initially mix the material with do seem like they're doing a better job of not sticking to it. So my plan is to just apply these as kind of stems. I kind of want to push that down so that it attaches well to the helmet. And then I'm going to attach, once I attach all 5 of these, I'm going to then go back and attach the lid. And there will be a little bit more space for the air to spread out so that the airflow is not blocked by the helmet. I want to get as much air into the bag as quickly as possible. I guess I'll only use 4. I could go, but I think that's kind of redundant. Why not? Might add a little bit of extra strength, as long as I set them up. I'll try it, but I could also, I think, have just gone with 4 pieces. Could have also gone with 6 or 8. Sometimes the simpler is better, so by that token, four. And I think effectively I will just make that 4. All right. And I'm starting to think that perhaps it would have been wiser to have directly put some of the epoxy on this and then join the 2 sets together. So which way is up? That way is up. I'm going to move around and check that I have the right way, have the right alignment. That's probably the most important thing with this. So I'm just trying to make sure that the part of this up is indeed the part that is facing up. All right. I'm going to move a little bit of this epoxy up around the lip just so that it has good grip. That way I'm not entirely just relying on the connection between the plastic and the epoxy. There's a little bit of mechanical grab as well. I have enough space under there for the air. And now, I also would like this to be somewhat level. So let's see wearing this I think that's about right. I definitely have more area for the air to pass out of this than I would have if I just attached it directly to the helmet. So I think that will work. One thing I'm going to do is see if I have something that I can attach to that lid, just so that I get a better idea of if it actually is going off in the direction that I want. Echo, please cancel the timer. Okay, so I found this jar, I think, has the same type of lid, and oops, that's my air filter. So what I'm doing with this jar is just trying to make sure that this is aligned the way that I want. Since the jar is a little bit extends from the lid, it kind of gives me a clearer idea of if it's aligned the way that I want, and I think that will do it. And at this point I will just not touch, because if I touch that I'm likely to get it even farther. So this was a video about using plumer's epoxy to apply the attachment point for the filter assembly with the headgear. So more simply said, fixing the lid of a jar to a bike helmet so that I can attach a filter and motor to make a device to protect from small particles.